The vice president laying out ways for the U.S. to continue countering Iran's support of terrorism and its continued crackdown on regime opponents. Meanwhile, Arab nations have reacted in anger to the Trump administration's decision to formally recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. You know, that's caused Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to refuse to meet with the vice president during this visit. Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and chairman of the Gatestone Institute here in New York, is with us every Sunday. Ambassador, Vice President is met with King Abdullah in Jordan today, and he said that the U.S. is committed to a two-state solution. But how can anything be achieved if Abbas is so dug in?
Well, a very good question. Look, this is an important meeting for the vice president, important trip. He had similar meetings with General el-Sisi in Egypt, now in Israel. And what he said in both Egypt and Jordan was the U.S. would support a two-state solution if the parties were to agree to it. Now, the way Abbas is behaving, I think, demonstrates that the two-state solution is in deep trouble, something I've believed for a long time. But Abbas is not doing himself any favors. This posturing over the Trump recognition of reality that Jerusalem is Israel's capital does not change a single thing in the peace negotiations. The president was very careful to say that the embassy would be in West Jerusalem, and just in the past few days, that's where we've announced we're going to put it, upgrading a current consular facility. So it doesn't establish new facts on the ground. It doesn't prejudice the Palestinian position at all. And to act in this childish way and not meet with the vice president, I think does the Palestinian cause far more harm than good.
Well, in a sense, as Abbas playing to his base, I mean, he had that outrageous speech. And has been quoted as, questioning the number of the deaths in the Holocaust, saying that Jews, they would rather be killed in Europe than move to Israel. I mean, how can you negotiate in good faith with someone who espouses that?
Yeah, well, I think, look, this has lurked beneath the surface, this anti-Semitism, for a long time, and it may well be that Abbas is appealing to his base. Right now, his base in the West Bank lives in occupied territory. So they're not in anywhere close to the situation they want to be. I hope at some point the administration recognizes, and perhaps it is already quietly, the two-state solution isn't going anywhere. If anything, I would say to King Abdullah of Jordan, be prepared to reassert Jordanian sovereignty over part of the West Bank, negotiate with Israel. I think that's a far better outcome than the continued pursuit of a mythical, I believe, unattainable, viable Palestinian state.
So what you're saying, you think that the West Bank, or parts of it, and East Jerusalem can revert back to Jordanian control, possibly?
Well, I think it's a lot more likely that Jordan and Israel, who already have a peace agreement between them, could negotiate a division of the West Bank, an allocation responsibility. For example, King Abdullah has a role as the custodian of the holy sites, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and so on, that ever-reaching agreement with the illegitimate Palestinian Authority. That still leaves the problem of Gaza for Egypt. But look, I think the West Bank could be solved relatively easy if the king were willing to step up, and I think he needs assurances. I'm sure that wasn't part of the vice president's trip, but I think giving him experience and direct conversation with the key actors, as I say, he's now in Israel, could presage an important role for the vice president in future negotiations.
Well, how do you get Abbas to agree to that? I mean, basically dismantling the Palestinian Authority and having him give up power.
Yeah, I think he's making himself irrelevant, and I think it's harmful to the Palestinian people. And at some point, you stop playing charades. I think that's what President Trump did in the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And the notion that the Palestinian Authority is anything other than a cover for the old Palestine Liberation Organization, I think is disappearing as well. It's a desperate situation for the Palestinian people. They've been the point of the spear for a long time from Arab opponents of Israel. They've suffered for it. They're suffering for it now. And Mahmoud Abbas's leadership is making them suffer worse.
And the administration is doing something that really hasn't been tried before. Nikki Haley at the UN cutting UNRWA funding. That's to the UN agency that helps the Palestinians, went down almost by half. And then, of course, you've got the terrorist funding that the Palestinian Authority gives to terrorists, convicted terrorists, and their families. The case of Taylor Force. Taylor, we've reported on, 26-year-old young man, graduate of West Point. He served in Afghanistan as well as Iraq, and he was knifed to death in the summer of 2016 by a Palestinian terrorist whose family, we're told, is receiving money, basically critics say blood money, $300 million a year, and there's a bill to try and stop this. Is the administration taking this one seriously? What do you think will happen, and what is the message of the Taylor Force Act and the effort on behalf of Taylor and the others who have been murdered in cold blood to try and stop the killing?
I think, first, the decision to withhold half of UNRWA's operating budget is the right thing to do. I think that should be the beginning of a complete reevaluation of whether we need UNRWA at all. The Taylor Force bill is only one reason, I think, why direct funding to the Palestinian Authority should be withheld. There's also statutory provision that if the Palestinian Authority tries to provoke investigations or action by the International Criminal Court, that the U.S. should cut off funding. They've already done that. I'm not quite sure why the Trump administration hasn't acted, but this is just one of several reasons why funding the Palestinian Authority, I think, is not in America's best interest, absent some dramatic change in the authority, which I see no evidence of happening.
Well, you know, critics of that would say that it would destabilize the authority, basically open it up to Hamas, as well as, you know, hurt some of the people on the ground, the innocent people.
Well, I think the authority has shown itself basically incapable of governing anyway. I think what the Palestinians need is an alternative to the corrupt kleptocracy represented by the authority and the terrorism represented by Hamas, which is why, to me, having Jordan and Egypt play roles is much more likely to actually benefit the Palestinian people, if anybody's paying attention to that. A
bold and brazen announcement and proposal by John Bolton today for Jordan to take over the West Bank and part of and all of East Jerusalem, basically, from the Palestinian Authority. Ambassador, always good to have your insight and your views here every Sunday. Thank you.
Glad to be with you.
Of course.